please welcome to the stage our second speaker, Speaker Jungmun Kwon, with the speech, How I Learned to Embrace My Stutter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. How's everyone doing today? Good? Great? Awesome. Now, first off, before we begin, I would like to start by asking all of you a question. Do you ever wonder about what goes on in the minds of other people? Do you ever wonder about what it's like to be another person, to think how they think, to feel how they feel? Well, what if I told you that just for a brief moment, you could be me? What if I told you that the portal to my world is right there on your very fingertips? Would you believe me? No? Well, let's see. And so, to do that, I would need everyone's attention, please, because we're gonna do a little exercise together. First, what I'd like you to do is to make your dominant hand into a fist, like so, and hold it up where I can see it. Good. Next, what I'd like you to do is to find a flat surface. It could be your backpack, it could be the back of your other hand, or even your thighs. Anything you can find. But if you do have a table, I encourage you to use it. Now, after that, what you're going to want to do is to use your other hand to pull out the ring finger on the hand that you're holding up. And place your hand firmly on the flat surface. Once you've done that, it should look something like this. Good. Now, has everybody done that? Good. Moving on to the most important part of all. Listen carefully. I would like each and every one of you to try to lift your ring finger off of the flat surface without moving either one of your hands or any other finger. In fact, if anyone can do that, I would personally give that person 50,000 VND after my speech. Good. Now, for the people who has tried to do it, who here thought it was hard? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Really, really hard. Because no matter what you do, no matter how much force, no matter how much effort you put in, your finger just won't budge. Your muscles simply won't act on your brain's orders. Now, was it also annoying? Yeah, it was, right? It feels almost as if you've got something really heavy that you need to get out of your chest, and even though you can see it in your mind, you can feel it coming. It just never does it? And so, after a while, it starts to get frustrating, painful even. You start to feel deluged with this feeling of pure hopelessness and the immense desire to give up. Because even though it might look simple, in reality, that could not be further from the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just done is exactly how I feel every single time I stutter. Now, to help you understand just why I'm here today, sharing with all of you one of my biggest insecurities, I would like to start off with a little bit of background. For those of you who don't know or are unclear of what stuttering actually is, the National Institute of Deafness and Communication Disorders defines it as a speech disorder which can be characterized by a certain prolonged sounds or interruption of speech, otherwise known as blocks. And what's more surprising, however, is that there are over 80 million people on this earth who have it. And yet, I, for one, am lucky enough to be one of them. But see, the thing is, for most of my life, I've never really felt that way. From what I can recall, My stutter developed sometime around the second grade. I was a young and shy kid, rarely ever taking part in class discussions, presentations, and even social events. That, coupled with the social stigma often associated with stuttering, just made me all the more reclusive and timid. For most of my life, I have been at war with my stutter. I have done everything in my power to get rid of something that I couldn't change, of something that was completely out of my control. In other words, I was fighting the inevitable. And needless to say, all of my efforts have brought nothing but pain, because hiding my stutter has only reaffirmed my belief that I am inferior, worthless, because of my speech impediment. Why? Because I was insecure. I kept asking myself, why can't I just be like the other kids? Why can't I just say what it is I want to say without constantly being interrupted? Why do I have to be so different? And it was because of those questions that I felt things no child should ever feel. I felt lonely. Lonely because no one had that condition. Because no one understood how I felt. I felt a lack of confidence because everything was hard. Even communicating with the ones that I am closest to, the ones that are supposedly the easiest to talk to. But much, much worse, I felt insignificant, powerless, because there was nothing I could do to stop it from happening. For most of my life, I have felt miserable, drowning in self-hatred, in feeling worthless. Like no matter what I did, my voice would still be insignificant, like a tiny grain of sand in a vast desert brimmed with massive gemstones. The things I felt at a young age were horrible, to say the least. And no child on this earth should be fighting life as much as I did back then. Now, I'd like to tell you all a story. From what I can recall, to my recollection, there was this one instance in third grade when my mom had just taken me out to dinner. It was at this fancy steak restaurant that I really loved. And so when we're just about to order, my mom received a phone call from her colleague talking about work. And since she was busy talking on her phone, she specifically requested that I order the food. And having a stutter did not help. Just as the waiter pulls up, I opened my mouth. But then, for a split second, my mouth was paralyzed. It was as if the muscles inside my mouth were somehow frozen, disconnected from my brain. Now, even though I could hear the words clearly in my mind, I can see it in my head, I could even feel it on the very tip of my tongue, and yet nothing came out. This is because when you have a stutter, you start to overthink everything. You know in your heart that you're going to stutter and that there's nothing you can do about it, causing you to stutter. And it was in that very moment that I realized what true hopelessness felt like. And let me tell you something, it did not feel good. And so the waiter just stood there, squinting his eyes as though in disgust. And even though I knew he was only curious and never meant to hurt my feelings in any way, I could not help but feel attacked by his reproachful gaze. I felt as though he thought I was a broken machine, not performing as it was designed to. And so, from that point on, I viewed stuttering as an embarrassing, humiliating, and even debilitating trait. Over the years, that idea festered in my mind like a deadly parasite would in the stomach of an animal. It continued to grow, to evolve, to perpetuate until it had gnawed away what was left of my meager self-esteem. What I think most people fail to grasp is just how detrimental stuttering can be to your mental health if you view it in a negative way. I mean, just imagine not being able to say, "Hi, how are you?" without constantly repeating the letter H. Or imagine not being able to say yes whenever the teacher is going through attendance without stammering. It can be really frustrating, exhausting, and even demoralizing if you let it. Which brings me to my main point. I'm not here today to complain about the difficulties I have with my stutter, but rather to show you how I had learned to embrace it, to view it not as a disability, but a special trait that only I have. And finally, how it had completely changed my life for the better. As I stand here today, I am reminded of a certain thought that I used to have. Oftentimes, after delivering an excellent presentation, I would ask myself if the audience still would have liked it, even if I had stuttered. Would they still have liked it, even if my ideas were conveyed clearly, but slowly and constantly interrupted? Would they still have liked it, even if I had wasted much of their time just trying to say simple words or phrases that should have only taken 1 to 2 seconds instead of 5 or so? In the back of my mind, there is a voice that would constantly tell me they wouldn't, that they never would nor could accept me for who I am. Ladies and gentlemen, that voice could not have been more wrong. I remember distinctly in the 7th grade, whenever I would stutter, my science teacher, Mr. Froylan, would constantly reassure me that it was perfectly fine and that he would gladly listen to my thoughts and ideas even if it took me a minute to answer a simple question. But most importantly, he told me something that has stuck with me to this day. He told me something that I couldn't even imagine at the time. He told me it was special and that instead of trying to hide it, I should learn to embrace it, to view it not as a disability, but a special trait. Oh, no. Sorry, for years, no, wait. And so, consequently, I grew more and more accepting of my stutter. And needless to say, all of my friends were too, as they were really supportive and considerate. And it was then that I realized just how vain and futile my war with my stutter has been. Because it wasn't my true enemy. Rather, it was my former self. It was me who had set myself up for failure all these years out of fear and embarrassment. It was me who had spent all this time worrying about if I were to stutter than if I did actually stutter. For years, I have been viewing it as a disability when it should have been a gift. And it is thanks to that now I no longer have to worry about stuttering. All I do now is say what I want to say, regardless of whether I stuttered or not. Before each conversation, I remind myself that it is perfectly fine to stutter, that it was just another manner of speaking that only I have, much like that of an accent. But most importantly, before each conversation, I remind myself that I own my stutter and that there was nothing it could ever do anymore that would upset me because I have fully embraced it. And it is thanks to that I have the courage to be here, to be talking in front of a large crowd about a topic that I have never done so explicitly before. But most importantly, it is thanks to that I am able to be truly happy with myself, to not be miserable because of a minor insecurity. Now, some of you may be wondering, why am I doing a TED Talk? Why couldn't I have just written a blog or made a video on YouTube that I can edit? Wouldn't that have been much easier? Why did I have to do a TED Talk when I have a stutter? When, if I fail, I might risk yet another dent in my mental health and confidence. Well, the short answer is this. I have a message to all those people out there who has something that they're insecure about, something that they can't change about themselves, that they should learn to embrace themselves, to embrace that fact, to not be miserable because of something out of their control. Whether it is your odd music taste, your personality, your interest, your passion, anything that defines you. So please, learn from my mistakes. Don't be like me. Don't fight the impossible. Because after all, the things that you can't change about yourself are your one true God-given constant. And ridding them would be stripping yourself of what makes you special. And so, when I was presented with the opportunity to do a TED Talk, I immediately realized that the best way to convey my message is to personally tell you about my journey, about how even someone who has faced as much pain and adversity in life as I have is able to come to terms with their insecurity. And well, if I can do that, then so can you. Because it is only until you have made peace with who you are as a person can you ever truly be happy, to be liberated from all the pressures of social conformity, of all the pointless worries, to be finally content with life. And it is thanks to that every day I am able to lift my ring finger. I am able to get out of my comfort zone, to do the things that I only wished I could do before. And so, on the topic of, are we fighting life or are we inviting life? I think I can proudly say that I am living proof of inviting life. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for listening, and I wish all of you a lovely afternoon.